Hello everyone, this is a video about the Domesday Book and about the biggest ever Penguin classic, the biggest Penguin classic ever even, or rather a follow-up to that video by Traumatic Tomes. That's the name of the channel anyway, so you can go and check that out. And really I was kind of inspired to do that. He did that video about Domesday, and of course I've got it sat on my shelves. This is the a version of an edition of, it's a paperback edition of the very same. This is from I'll mention it later. He did talk about it, but he didn't really talk about the content particularly. And the content for me, being English, was particularly interesting in terms of the place names. So one of the wonders of England and looking over a map of England is the place names, which of course many of which are terribly, terribly old and very ancient indeed. Lots of you'll know this from the place endings, the things ending ton and ham. These are things that derive from the Vikings. So pre-conquest sort of place names that are they're still there today, and all sorts of other things that are relevant. And also somehow or other that whole concept of 1,000 years and more, literally, and more than 1,000 years of these place names that have somehow appeared, emerged, become established over those years, and in those kind of very, very, very early years, and perhaps have been adjusted. Perhaps, I'm not sure. There's a whole subject area, evidently. But yeah, it's kind of astounding and incredible, kind of almost sublime, to look over a map and check out some of these place names. So I kind of thought I'd do the same. And I thought I'd try and pick out a little kind of sample of some names that perhaps will be a bit more worthwhile to hear. Some of the names, they're not really particularly, the ones I picked out they're not particularly tremendously historic. I'll leave that for one and all. But I've got a little list here that I'm going to read out of the kinds of names that did exist at the time of Domesday. But also, before that, one of the main things that struck me about Traumatic Tomes' video was that he missed out, or he didn't mention, a particularly meaningful or evocative name. Because not only is there a Drogo to be found on page 1052 of this edition as a landholder in the county of Norfolk, but in the county of Suffolk and Norfolk and Essex there is one Frodo. Yeah, yes, Frodo. He is a landowner at the time of the conquest. Lots of the entries in here have a little abbreviation that means in the time of King Edward. And Frodo is, it turns out, the brother of an abbot. And he is literally listed in Suffolk as lands of Frodo, the abbot's brother. So he has lands in Radwinter in Essex, and also in Suffolk, and a place called Stowe in Suffolk as well, and also in Norfolk. So there is, Frodo is real. He existed and lived in East Anglia in England at the time of the conquest. Yeah. So turning to some of the place names, and I'll come back to Frodo and Frodo's lands at the end after this little bit here. I'm going to leave my favourite to the end as well. Okay, I've got a little list to give you a little idea of the kinds of places that existed. There's an Abbot's Worthy in Hampshire, a Coffin's Well in Devon, Why? A Compton Pantsfoot in Somerset, a Little Cubley in Derbyshire, a Doxy in Staffordshire. Well, why not? Or maybe not, depending. There's a Fadmore, no association, in Yorkshire, and in Essex, a Fobbing, 2 B's, Fobbing. And there's a Frisbee, amazingly enough. Did they get the a Frisbee on the Wreck in Leicestershire? Presumably they got the word from something else. Maybe it was a person. Who knows? But there's a Frisbee on the Wreck in the Domesday Book. There's also a Freebie, also in Leicestershire. And why not? Many good things come from Leicestershire. And a Frog Furley. Quite how they got that and what that means, I have no idea. The Furley bit of it, anyway. Frog Furley was in Sussex. For Henry II, people with an interest in Henry II's reign, a Glanville's Wooton in Dorset. So that's obviously pretty meaningful. And for particularly of note for our American friends, or you guys out there from America, there is a Gotham in Nottinghamshire. Whether or not Gotham in Nottingham is anywhere near Loxley in Nottinghamshire, well, I have one or two things to say about that. But there is also a Hutton Roof, which I'm sure you'll get. Hutton Roof. Loxley, turning to. I couldn't find a Loxley in Nottinghamshire. Only in Warwickshire, and there's another one in Staffordshire. But Nottinghamshire? Nope, no Loxley. How about that? There is a Pillock, Pillock, a Pillock. The village of Pillock was in Somersetshire. I haven't looked it up. Perhaps you might like to do so and tell us what you found out, or not, as the case may be. There's a North Piddle in Worcestershire. There is an Ousburn in Yorkshire. There is a Lower and Greater Pan, literally Pan, Pan, a Lower Pan and a Great Pan, also in Hampshire. There's an Onslow, literally as per the character from the TV programme. Onslow was in Shropshire and still may be there today. Probably on a sofa or an armchair of some sort. Maybe. Maybe I'll edit that bit out. There's a No Bottle in Northamptonshire. Literally, as in no bottle, but it's one word. The village of No Bottle. There's a Mutley in Devon, and my favourite of all, a Much Markle, which is in Herefordshire. Yes, Much Markle, 2 words. Marcle, Much Markle. Yeah, that could be the origins and derivation of the very famous and current Markle version, or is it Markle Windsor? I don't know. Perhaps it's their children. Anyway, turning back to our old friend Frodo. Yes, Frodo. He has a number of entries in my version. 1235 is the main one, and I thought you might want to hear exactly what an entry actually sounds like, what it actually says in an entry for the Domesday Book. So, how we get to it, of course, is another thing. The book, the Domesday Book, is divided up into counties. And then within each county, at the beginning of each county, there's a list of the main landholders. And for practically every county, the guy at the top of the list is, surprise, surprise, King William. After that, there's some bishops and some abbots, and then some earls, and maybe a countess or count, or maybe not a countess maybe. And then just names. There aren't any others. Nobody is listed as a baron. Nobody is listed as a lord. They're just persons. So, yeah. literally at the beginning of, I should have looked this up before. So for Suffolk is in Little Domesday, and they did things differently. So there is no list for the landholders in Suffolk. But make no mistake, Roger Bigod features prominently, and so does Nigel d'Aubigny, perhaps in several different counties. For Nigel d'Aubigny, quite prominent, I've noticed throughout the book. There's a Roger de Poitou. There's a William de Écuyer, or however you pronounce that. There's a Hermer de Ferrers. Hermer, Hermer. There's a Ralph de Beaufort, and then the lands of Frodo, the abbot's brother. The 100 of Blackbourne. Acwulf, a thane, held Thel Netham as a manor during the time of King Edward, with 2 carucates of land. Then as now 8 boarders. Then 6 slaves. Now only 2. Then as now 3 ploughs in domain, and 1 plough belonging to the men. 4 acres of meadow, woodland for 30 pigs. Then as now 1 mill, then 1 horse. Then as now 3 head of cattle. Then 50 pigs, now 25. Then 2 sheep, now 35. And now 3 beehives. And those 2 slaves were probably, it might be the case. I don't know whether I can actually even find that, but quite often in these kinds of out-of-the-way places, the few slaves that are left existing after about 1102 in the Council of Westminster, they tend to disappear in wills, as far as I know. And I found 1 or 2 examples of that. There's a guy who left 2 slaves in East Norfolk to the care of the Diocese of Ely as freemen. The will was from something like the 1110s, I think, something like that. So who knows? Maybe Frodo himself does exactly that when he does finally pass away. Probably not in Rivendell or wherever he is. I don't know. Yeah. Frodo is a real guy. And there he is. The other thing that I wanted to read out was for Norwich. And I think I may have already done this. So, whoops. Yeah. We'll leave it there, I think, for now. I'll probably pick it up with Norwich. The one for Norwich is perhaps quite interesting for history buffs of the Middle Ages. It reads as follows. There were 1,320 burgesses in Norwich during the time of King Edward, of whom 1 was subject to the lordship of the king to the extent that he could not withdraw nor do homage without his license. And his name was Eardstan, and he had 18 acres of land and 12 acres of meadow, and 2 churches in the borough, and a 1/6 part of a 1/3. And to 1 church belonged the messuage in the borough, and 6 acres of meadow. Roger Bigod holds this of the king's gift. And of 1,238 burgesses, the king and the earl had sake and soak and customary dues, and over 50 Stigand had sake and soak and commendation, and over 32 Harold had soak and sake and commendation, of whom 1 was subject to his lordship to the extent that he could neither withdraw nor do homage without his license. Although they had 80 acres of land and 12.5 acres of pasture, and of these 1 was a woman, Stigand's sister, with 32 acres of land, and between them all they had 1/2 mill and a 1/4 part of 1 mill, and still have them, and in addition they had 12.5 acres of meadow, which Wyandotte took from them. Now Reginald Fitz-Ivo has them, and in addition they had 2 acres of meadow which belonged to the Church of All Saints. Those also Wyandotte took, and now Reginald has them. And it kind of sort of goes on and on a fair bit thereafter. and over the page. Yeah, and it finishes up. And in the borough, 190 empty messuages in this quarter, which was in the soak of the king and the earl, and 81 in the occupation of the castle, the famous Norwich Castle. In addition, there are, I think it became a bit more famous after the conquest. But in addition, there are in the borough 50 houses from which the king does not have his customary dues. Of these, Reginald, Roger Bigod's man, has 2. So, there you have it. Slightly different, but definitely the Penguin Classic. You can see that from here. That's pretty well the only marking of how it says Penguin. I don't think it says Penguin at any point anywhere on the front cover, just on the binding there. But there is. Yeah, it's not something you read from cover to cover, but you can pick and choose places and see if they exist at the time of Doomsday, and then find out that maybe there's only 50 people living there, whereas nowadays there might be sort of 2,000 or 5,000 or something. So the Doomsday Book, the whole thing. Let's just double check this. It's called A Complete Translation, and it involves Great Doomsday, by county, and Little Doomsday. And of course, Little Doomsday is, for those that know, Essex, Norfolk, and Suffolk, for those that don't know. This particular version, with its nice front cover, was published in 2002. No, it wasn't. The translation is from 1992 and as a hardcover in this edition, 2002, and this is a paperback of that, I think probably 2002 as well. The Doomsday Book. Bye for now.